THC and CBD and all this, a lot of farmers get stuck on asking that question, how high is the CBD? But like really the major issues is what happens in the field. Is how's it grow? How does it perform in that environment? Is it a hot environment? Is it a wet environment, especially during the times when it's put flowers on? Is it a cold environment? Like I seen a crop in Klamath. I think they did 300 acres. And when I got there, it was like very uniform, the fields. And I thought they were auto flowers, and that was a fertility issue. They started with good stock. But when I asked, how'd you pick these genetics? The businessman among them said, yeah, I went to Salinas and saw them in a greenhouse, and they were really high CBD and really uniform. And so it was obvious they were uniform because they had all died about the same time. And it was that cold that they couldn't take. It was interesting too, that the purplest ones were the ones that had the least death rate to them, but they had all pretty much uniformly perished. And that was a moment where the farmer didn't ask, how do they grow in my environment? And it was really telling.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I'm sorry, Reg, go ahead.
No, quite right. That's like the biggest thing is how to tailor the specific genetic choices to your environment. What are your extremes you're dealing with?
Right. So, we see the same thing, Reggie. We see a lot of people focused on certificate of analysis, which the first thing I'm going to tell you is that's the most fallible piece of documentation that we have in the space. So, check those, double check those, triple check those. But most importantly, if you're not planting a plant that is set for your region and has agronomic traits that are going to be suitable to what you have to face, then yeah, you're going to struggle. And I think what Reggie just brought up there is even phenotypic variability. When we talk about the anthocyanin potential, like he just mentioned, the only ones in the field were the purple ones that were left. Well, when we're talking about these filio 1 genetics, until we get, speaking to the farmers out there, until we get F7 to F11 varieties where we have true to type plants that are 9 out of 10 dominant alleles carry from parent to offspring. Until we get there, we still have a little bit of phenotypic variability to look at. And I've found the same thing, folks, that, and I don't know if any of you have, that when we see plants in our expressions or in our lines that have purple or green or yellow expressions, the chemotypes seem to be the same in our lines, but we do see these color and phenotypic variability, phenotypic differences. And we're finding that the anthocyanin-based plants do handle the cold better. And we're also finding that the anthocyanin tends to be a response to cold. So there's something to be talking about there. When we get up to these northern regions, the purples, there is something to be said for that anthocyanin and its ability to protect. So just putting that out there, and would love any feedback anybody else has seen. But realize, as much as we all know, we're still learning. We're putting these plants out into tough environments, places that we've never put them out before. So, learning together is really important, and looking at what survives well and what doesn't. I think that's a critical component to selection. But now getting on a little further here, Reggie, I think, one of the things that is really interesting about you is your experience with plants closer to the equator. Again, like, you have so much experience in Hawaii, and me being a guy who's farmed a lot between the 35th and 48th parallel, let's say, to start to understand what these plants are doing when we get them down to 17 degrees and 18 degrees, it's a whole different ballgame. And I have to say, you've given me just a wealth of understanding of how that works, and helped us to understand which direction to breed in. You want to lean a little bit into maybe some of what happens as we get closer to the equator, what you've seen?
Well, yeah, for one, there's multiple seasons when you start from seed. In Hawaii, for instance, there's 3 seasons, 2 shoulder seasons, and then the long season. But for most temperate things, it's like hemp, there really is at least 3 seasons. Because even in the long season there's marijuana strains, of course, that are more acclimated to the equatorial band, and they'll grow 220 days, for instance, but very few hemp genetics that will grow that long. And so like when you plant them, the season of course stretches a little bit in the depth of long season for like maybe 120, 140 days. But oftentimes you put it out and it'll be done, say 80 to 100 days from seed, from planting. And so like that's why most people do use photo period extension techniques with lights, just to build predictability into their models at the lower latitudes. And
Sure.
you have to adjust the quantity, the plants per acre relative to the size that you're going to achieve in the field. And so it's that dynamic, that interplay of way more plants per acre. I think in Jamaica, they were using between 11,000 and 14,000 plants per acre. And that's not unheard of in that type of environment, or more. I've heard up to 26,000 plants in an acre. It's depending on what you're going for and the time of year you're planting.
When you say that, and it sounds like, we're almost going into autoflower planting densities, but that's kind of what we've seen, huh, Reggie, is that these plants, if they're not fully photoperiodic, they tend to trigger really early. If they are not required to reach sexual maturity and really dependent on watching the day length, then they tend to come on to flower really early for us, right?
Yep. And functionally, if you have a 1350 as your longest day, most of these hemp genetics will begin to flower at 14, the 14 light, 10 dark. And so really they grow up a little bit, and that's the difference. Those are the metrics that we need on all the genetics, is like how many days and at what time of planting for these equatorial bands will it instigate into, it will go into flower. So
yeah, because what you talk about as well, this is really unique when you speak about these three growing regions. And I know we're kind of folks on the extreme end of this when we're talking about Hawaii, but this is all relevant to all of our farmers in Southern California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana. It's all relevant to them. But you also talk about how if we plant later in the cycle, if we take advantage of the fact that the photo period has already started to decrease, or closer to that June 21st time, that in Hawaii, what happens is now the flowers express themselves completely differently. Instead of being early to trigger, they tend to take a much longer period to trigger. Is that, can you elaborate on that a little bit, Reggie, or am I off base?
They do relative. And it's relative to the time. If you plant in March, in most hemp genetics, you'll probably have a June, July finish in Hawaii, for instance. But if you plant in June, for instance, you might stretch into October. But like the interesting thing that they're finding in Hawaii as well is that the potency, so to speak, spikes sooner in the winter, but really that's physiological maturity. Every night at over 12 dark pretty much acts as a more of a night. So their whole flowering period could be a 5-week period instead of an 8-week period, for instance, in the depth of winter or going into December, January. So that seasons get way shorter on the shoulder seasons. And then long seasons, for instance, a clone that might take 45 days to flower may take 73 days in the long season there, but be twice as big.
Right.
And that's just the peculiarities of the light cycle. And then you have ascending versus descending. And then like really with hemp, they're all going to finish more so than a marijuana varietal that has more sativa or a long flowering lineage in it.
That's a really good point to bring up, is even when we talk about hybrids and how these go. So first, let me pause for a second. I do want to talk about hybrids. I want to circle back to Pat Jack. Just brought up a point. He mentioned that Jamaica, has a lot of wind. And I think just circling back, and then we'll move back to Southern expressions. I think that's another thing that you guys really need to be paying attention to when you're planting, is how these plants are going to stand up to just, what the daily beatings are, and think of that from a young plant standpoint and on and on. So, bushier plants are obviously going to handle the wind a little bit better. Heavy stalks are going to handle the wind a little bit better. The other side of that, though, is as these plants start to get larger, we find longer internodal spacing plants with thinner blade leaves tend to be able to sustain the wind a little bit better, and certainly allow for higher planting density, which will help to push off the wind and still allow light strike. I see Sally Spicer. Scott, are there any questions that anybody be interested in asking right now to Reggie or I?
We have a question from Bobby Mitchell in South Mississippi.
Okay.
He wants to know what the best practices for muggy conditions.
Okay. Well, when you're talking about muggy conditions, if you can mute Tim. If you're talking about, I don't know, I'm getting a little feedback.
I know, that's me.
Okay, that's all good.
Computer finally started working.
It's what an amazing thing that we're all able to do this, though, that we have people from all over the nation right now together doing this. But yeah, essentially, when we're talking about these muggy regions, it's, you know, especially when we're full term plants, it's really important that you look at mold and mildew studies. They're out there. You need to select genetics that have already been trialed in these regions at the very least. But in our case, you can certainly find that we've done mold and mildew studies with universities. In particular, I think the best one is University of Vermont. They did gray mold, white mold, botrytis, and powdery mildew on 5 of our varieties. And, you know, it's a really good testament to what we've bred as far as mildew resistance. And, you know, I'd say that, folks, that one thing different about Davis, and, you know, we're not really here to sell seed today, we're here to educate. But I would say one of the things that's really different about Davis is that we have bred for field hardiness. So our genetics tend to do very well in fringe climates. So if you're at high altitude, or you're in a place with early frost, or other end of the extreme, you know, you're in a place that has 120-degree days in the summer and super low humidity, those are the places that our plants tend to do very well. And the same we've seen down at these southern latitudes, just because we breed fully photoperiodic plants. So anybody that gets closer down, you know, to Florida and these places, our plants start to really make a lot of sense for you as far as getting a sizable plant that's going to give you a good yield, versus the sub-auto flowers that are going to want to flower very early on and not give you a high yield. So hopefully that answers that. But any other questions?
No, not at the moment. Not at the moment.
Okay, cool. I just saw Sally's hand was raised and wanted to make sure that we addressed her if she had anything that she wanted to say. Yeah,
No,
and then
she commented that she sees those purple expressions come out in the fall up where she's at in Washington with those.
Perfect. And, you know, those are the type of things as we're learning together. That's another thing about us is, look, we're here for all the feedback. One thing we recognize is that this is an industry that's nascent, it's young, it's volatile. And the important thing for us is that it stabilizes. If the industry remains volatile and we don't find stability, we don't find standardization, then it's at risk. And I think all of us want to see this work. So that's why you see me all the time out here pushing for the heavy lifting, supporting anybody, just so we can create a sustainable industry. And a lot of that is going to come from farmer feedback. So if you guys are out there telling us, hey, we found this painted lady phenotype that was 10% better than any of these others, you're likely to get me to jump in the car and come out there and take a look at what that is, or jump on a plane, because we're still trying to learn. So I just want to make that clear to everybody that you're as critical of a tool to development for us as anything internally. So please don't ever hesitate to give us feedback.
Okay, we have a new question from Sally.
Okay.
Do you recommend light deprivation up here in Washington, or are the resistance and genetics just so that we can stave off mold later in October and let the plants go full term?
That's a really good question, Sally. So being from Oregon here, we've had to deal with this western coastal climate that hits at the worst time of year. And it's the same for Reggie. He's in NorCal now. And so our experience with, you know, growing plants and putting all the input into them, and then having these beautiful flowering plants just about to harvest, and recognizing that they're full of botrytis and you're not going to get anything out of them, that's real for us. So when we made all of our selections, we bred very heavily for mold resistance. So yes, Sally, we bred a genetic that ideally, both from frost potential and mold potential, is going to get through whatever hard rains that we have usually in September or early October, and get us to that Indian summer, if you will, that nice breath of fresh that we have that leads us towards the end of November. And towards the end of October. And I would say that, you know, although these genetics will senesce and finish and be mature in week 1 of October, and if you push them with nutrition, you can pull them back a little bit earlier on some of our varieties. There is a great benefit to compound production if you let them go a little longer. It's a constant game with the cannabis farmer or the hemp farmer outdoors in Oregon for decades of pushing that envelope, but never going too far so you lose your crop. But everybody that's been in it understands that the further the plant goes, the more richness in the compounds, the more diverse the compound production gets to an extent. I mean, obviously, just so you know, we're looking at the 2 stigma on the flower, which are what receives the pollen. And those 2 stigma will senesce or die. That's the sign of maturity on the plant. It's generally the sign that we look for. And so we're looking for 70 to 80% senescence or die off or turning to red or brown on those stigma to be a true symbol of maturity. So don't get me wrong. Obviously, anything can go too ripe. But what we generally see with cannabis and hemp is people pushing it up, pulling it out of the field too early. Anything else anybody have, or should we move on?
No, as of right now, no, we can keep moving along.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm super excited about our next guest here. Reggie and I are going to anchor this thing through the whole deal. So you're going to see our mugs continue, but I'm super excited about the next guest that we have here. So this is a gentleman that I've recently met, and I'm just super enamored with his work and what they're doing, because they're leading an important part of this game. So we who have been in this for a while recognize this plant is food, fuel, fiber, and medicine. I think most people on this podcast are in that same place, or this webinar in that same place of understanding that this is a really complex plant. And this is one of the things that Ben Brimlow, who we're about to bring out, has done. He's been working with INDHemp. He is the lead agronomist for INDHemp. They have been working with some of the premier European genetics and Canadian genetics to reintroduce fiber and grain into the country. And just super proud to have him on here. Ben, welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks, guys. Just want to start off with saying this is pretty cool, hearing all the cannabinoid talk. And I don't have a background in cannabinoids. I have a background in field crops, both breeding genetics and production. So to hear all your science is pretty awesome. So I was asked to comment on the current state of industrial hemp genetics, and my background is mostly in the fiber and grain side, the grain more so. And I typically put them in 4 different categories, or 3 different origins. I see let's see here. I see fiber hemp being the strong genetics come from Europe and from China. Canada has really focused on the grain the last 20 years. Some of the premier grain varieties come out of Canada. And by grain, I mean seed for hemp seed oil, hemp hearts, hemp seed protein. And I think the US, obviously you guys being the leaders in this, have really pushed the cannabinoid, terpene, all of those compounds. The US leads in that. So now, now we're stepping in the game, and we want to bring better genetics to fit regions in the US that haven't been represented well. The biggest thing that keeps coming up is regional adaptation. Letting our guys down in Texas and Louisiana and Florida and southern latitudes be able to start growing hemp. It's been a real challenge, and we've got so much to learn. And I think, hearing your experience with the cannabinoid side is really gonna help us bring grain varieties out of Canada and start helping them stretch down into the southern latitudes.
Yeah, what are you seeing down there? You guys see an early flower trigger or flower onset, or what's happening that's stifling? Yeah,
that's been the biggest challenge, has been these Canadian grain varieties. When we bring them south, they plant them, like they typically would in Canada, in the month of May, and 3 weeks after emergence, they turn reproductive, and you start seeing the male flowers popping up and the flower initiation, to where instead of getting 4.5 feet of growth, you got 2 feet of growth, and then the weeds come in and surpass it. So that's a it's a really big deal. Is regional adaptation and breeding for regions. We've been lucky up here in Montana. We're just across from Saskatchewan and Alberta, so these Canadian varieties just jump right over the border just fine. Northern Plains are a good fit, but there's so much potential elsewhere in the nation.
Yeah, and so as far as looking at grain down in the southern states, or looking at bass fiber down in the southern states, I mean, if you were to pick a direction that we need to go, this is a thing. I mean, when we're talking about this, we have this as food, fuel, fiber, and medicine. And when we have industrial crops, we have a bunch of different directions to go, including potentially a true dual crop, or, again, short fiber, long fiber. What would you think that we should be helping the southern farmers to be focused on? Is there a particular, because obviously this X59, which is the Canadian variety, is crushing it up in Montana. Are we wanting to push the Texas farmers towards grain production? Do you think fiber production's is it long fiber?
Yeah.
Is it short fiber? Yeah.
That's
just curious.
That's a big question. And we're going to be finding out more this season. I've sent seed down to Florida, down to Texas, Kansas, Indiana, all across the US, and they're doing studies that are going to expound more on that. Right now, what we can do for a Band-Aid is adjust our agronomic practices. I think our Texas growers, there might be a chance if they planted in the month of March, which we're a little behind right now, or early April, we could maybe see some way they can kind of tweak it to use the genetics from Canada and other countries and make it work. But eventually, we will need breeding specifically for these environments. One thing that has, I think you talk about the fiber side and that one, unless we can find varieties tolerant to cold, that could handle the winters, I still see fiber production fitting the northern latitudes with the long days in the summer. Most fiber genetics originate in northern latitudes. So across Europe, pretty much even the Italian varieties are still northern latitude. When you really look at, I think it's probably Dakotas or something. It's all very far north.
Got it.
I'd say if there was a variety to fit our southern production, it would be the Chinese. They do have a fiber variety called Yuma down in originating in the southern part of China that may fit in Texas, Florida environments, but we still need early planting.
We'll have some, I would add that we will have some data to share with you, Ben, actually, that you bring that up triggers my mind here, that there is a bunch of that Yuma going in Paraguay right now, and it should be just about for harvest, just about ready for harvest right now. So that's a 25th parallel south.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
it's good for us to start paying attention to those guys too and what they're doing. Yeah, it looks like Scott's wanting to chime in. Maybe
we have a question from Pat Jack for Ben. He asks, when should a laden grain flower be harvested so that it could be photographed in a macro studio setting? Best colors, best flower component development, and easily seen mature seeds that won't fall out of the flower so I can work with it in the studio.
So I could say in Montana at our latitude, you're looking at middle to late July. You'll start seeing those seed formation in the head, in the bud. If you want a riper seed or more mature seed, you'd be looking at end of August. But they starts in July, mid-July. The flowers will start seeding and they go all the way through August and into September. So it depends on how mature you want that bud in the seed. But I think it's all beautiful. It's just, yeah.
Get us more boy pictures, Pat. That's true. We want more boy pictures. Lots of good lady pictures out there, but get us some more pictures of some beautiful seed laden plants and some beautiful males. So
yeah, I got a few of them right behind me here. I know that's
I see,
to most of you cannabinoid folks, that's an ugly sight, but it's nice. It's nice we need males at sometimes, to do something. You don't have to get rid of them all. So grain hemp, it definitely is a good fit. We need that for pollination.
Yeah, and I guess, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to pick it back up with you. Scott, anything? We good?
We had one question. We want someone want to know how to spell Yuma.
Okay. So and this is Jeremy was mentioning the Yuma production down in Uruguay. I've heard there's a number of different Yumas on the market. This one from China, I believe, is YU, and I think there's a space between the Ma. I think Ma is hemp in Chinese. We also work with Jin Ma. So this Yuma that I'm talking about, it has Chinese origin.
Okay. Well, listen, Ben, Scott, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, we just got another question in from Sally Spicer. Ben,
Great.
are you familiar with Fiber Shed from NorCal, Northern California?
I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm stuck out in the field working with my farmers so much. I haven't got to meet other industry players as much as I would like to. But there's some exciting stuff going on the manufacturing and processing side for sure. I would love to learn more about them.
Thank you, Sally, for jumping in, and thanks, Ben, for answering that. So, I guess my question for you is twofold: is where are we headed, or where should we be headed from a breeding standpoint? This is a very personal question. Where should we be heading from a breeding standpoint, and does it involve dual or tries? What are your thoughts on that? And honest, be honest.
Yeah. My vision is evolving a little, but right now, from what I see is hemp essentially splitting into single purpose production, and finding the producers that best fit that production. So, and the analogy I'll give is, you don't tell an onion farmer to buy a combine and grain bins and elevators and massive tractors. And likewise in hemp, what I think our vision needs to be is fit the farmers, fit the production. An onion producer, he's gonna be best fit for growing cannabinoid hemp. He's got the seeders, he's got the ground, the irrigation center pivots. A dryland grain farmer up in Montana, North Dakota, Texas, all through the Midwest, I see them fit in the grain production. They don't have to change much out on their farm. They don't have to buy drying equipment, build sheds, and it fits almost perfectly. Likewise, fiber production, I see hay producers really fit in that niche. They don't have to buy a combine, but they've got the swather, they've got the baler, they've got the rakes. I do see, even though it's an amazing crop where we love to see everything out of the one stand, I do see it best, if we want to best fit our farmers and our production, to split them out for in most cases. That being said, I do think if you're wanting to dual crop, my view on it is, I think fiber, which would require maybe some more breeding, but fiber and cannabinoid may have the best dual cropping potential. Your yields are, of course, going to be lower on the cannabinoid, but you can still at least, we like to wait for that plant to start flowering and start the bud formation to begin, I think 20% or so. And in Europe, they have the equipment set already where they can top that fiber crop and then windrow the stems out behind and pull two off. But I don't see cannabinoid and grain production being a good fit dual crop, just because when you run that head through the combine, the trichomes are obliterated and just smashed to bits and blown out the back of the combine oftentimes. We've got an outfit up here in Montana that are trying to make it work, and I'm giving them, I'm hoping they find a way to make it work, but it's been a real struggle. High quality genetics, high quality seed, but it just doesn't fit. It has a hard time when you run that through equipment like a combine. It's pretty rough on the material.
Yeah, and resin is pretty rough on equipment sometimes too. So it's a fine balance. Well, and you bring up a good point. So we're aware of the dual deck harvesting equipment that comes out of Europe, and particularly out of Bulgaria. And we also see the situation there. You know, we have the benefit of having 940 million cropland acres in the US alone, right? So the idea that we can take advantage of some of those different regions to really lean into creating a viable single purpose crop is real. And, you know, we do see the big push in Bulgaria and Europe for these dual purpose. And it's exactly what you said. It's cutting the head off, the seed head off, or the top off, and then windrowing the stalk. But again, when we have this massive amount of acreage and we have so many dryland acres, it's another side of this that are, you know, potentially great for this crop. I agree with you, and that's really neat to hear what you're saying. I mean, not that we want to waste ground, but we have so much diversity in our land, and some of it is going to be really well suited for grain. Some of it's going to be really well suited for fiber, I imagine.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Jeremy. You know, it's this crop, this plant is amazing, cannabis sativa. How you can have so many different products off the same stem. I don't know of any other species that, you know, especially in agriculture production, where you can that crop can be niched into so many different areas and completely different systems. But it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and most of the products are actually superior, or at least equal to anything we're getting out of, you know, petrochemical or other textiles. Yeah. It's phenomenal when you look at it. It's not just somebody trying to fix the world with a subpar product. These products are superior. And yes, this plant has certainly evolved parallel to us to offer us a great deal of over unity. There's no question about that. So I'm glad you recognize that. Man, it's an honor to have you on here, Ben, for sure. I think this is a unique thing that we're trying to do here, of give people kind of a broad picture of what the plant does. I think most of the time people in my space are focused on cannabinoids and specifically and CBD or THC, and then you have industrial people over here. But you're talking to a guy who, you know, has sat with Jack Hare, you know, back in the day, and who is friends with Chris Conrad, who was the editor of The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And so I'm groomed on that, you know, Prohibition Bible, if you will. And, you know, this understanding of this plant and what it has done for us historically and what it can do for us going forward. So it's just an absolute honor to have you, Ben. So appreciate you coming by, man.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. It's exciting.
Great. Well,
hey guys, I have a couple more questions from the attendees.
Please.
First one is from Pat Jack. He asks, is the feminization of hemp seed for grain production so that per acre production can be doubled, and to use a mechanical pollination event that is very short duration? Is that a topic of conversation in the hemp grain production community?
Yeah, don't. You're getting too far ahead. No, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, well, he's exactly right. I mean, that is totally in the discussion. The challenge, and we do have some monoecious, we call them monoecious. I don't know if it's technically monoecious, but production where we have it's okay. I know feminized and monoecious is not the same, but we do have some varieties that every stalk produces female flowers. And I think we will see that eventually, where we do have 95% female plants, and then just the 5% male needed to pollinate. The tricky part is the seed production to get cost viable, expense, lower cost seed. That's a big deal for growers, for grain growers, especially if they're paying more than 60, 70 bucks an acre on their seed. That can be a challenge to get them to even grow the crop in the first place. Even if they are making more than, say, their wheat crop. But I do definitely think there's someone's going to come up with a variety that, or a method of producing feminized seed for grain production, and that would be phenomenal. That could possibly double our yields.
All right, well, it's out on the table now, Pat. So that's what we're doing in 2021. I want you guys to know that. There's spilled the beans, big stuff coming out. So for grain production, that's what we've been working on for the last 3 years. And that is exactly what we're doing for 2021. So it's out there on the table now. We were kind of keeping it close to the chest, but Pat put it out there. So I'm more than happy to let everybody know that that's exactly what we were planning to do for 2021, is to have the first 92% female feminized crops with 8% male to increase bushels of per acre. We figure it's by 153% on average. So everybody else, here we go.
You mean 2022, Jeremy?
I mean 2021. We're doing the first trials on them, Reggie, and we're going to have the foundation seed for 2022.
Great.
Yes.
Wow.
So yes,
that is
this year, right now.
Right on.
All right. Well, any other questions for Ben? That was a good one, Pat. And I didn't really want to go there, but I'm happy because that's what we're all about. It's not about anything proprietary. This is about helping the entire industry to develop. We understand the value of that. This is how we impact things for our kids' kids. And anybody who's on this on this webinar now, I know all of you know that it's real. We're going to do that. We're doing it every day. We're fixing this planet for our kids' kids through this plant. So thank you all. Okay, so I'm going to, if there's no more questions for Ben, I'm going to go ahead and.
We got another question from Cooper.
Okay.
Yes. Any idea of a breed that would be ideal for straw production in Appalachia? Also curious about an ideal breed for structural purposes such as hemp wood.
Yeah. Well, yeah. On the fiber side, you want to know what your end product is first, right? You start from that side, and so if you're just trying to get biomass, I mean, there's all sorts of varieties. I don't know what varieties do best in Appalachia. I really don't. But there's some studies, there's some trials that have been done in New York, Indiana. I'd recommend maybe checking those university trial studies out. I wish I had more on that, but.
That's great. That's what it's all about, pushing the envelope. When we hit the stuff that we don't know, that's a great place for us to leave this webinar and start digging into some books and seeing what we can understand too. But that being said, I'm proud. All these people on here, you have the cutting edge as far as the understanding of what's going on currently globally in cannabinoid hemp, industrial hemp, and certainly in the longevity of the cannabis plant. So thanks, Ben. I'm going to go ahead and
we got one more question for Ben.
All right.
Should be a quick one. It's from Drew Kitt. He asks, can you use grain stock for building material?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. So when we talk about monocrop or dual crop and grain production, you're always going to have a stem, right? You're always going to have a stalk, and you should always plan to do something with that, because the farmers can't till that back into their field. It's a nuisance. It's a pain. In Canada, they usually burn it or bale it. So yes, I think grain stalks, so the hemp stalk off a grain crop is perfect for building materials. That hurd content will be very good. The fiber quality will not be for true textile grade purposes. We don't think it will be, but most definitely. It's obviously a secondary product. The grain is going to be your primary focus. But yeah.
Well, folks, I'm going to shut off the questions, even if there is one more for Ben, because we're going to bring him back for Q&A here in about 10-15 minutes. We are running about 10 minutes behind, and I want to make sure that we're considerate of everybody's time. So I'd like to cruise back to just having Reggie and I for a few minutes, download on what Ben was talking about, and then I'm going to bring out John Bays, my good friend John Bays, who did the Bhutan Glory collaboration with us. Absolute wealth of knowledge, incredible human being. But for a few minutes, let's download. Reggie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really, it's time to get these plants everywhere and start doing selections to move it, like you said, to give something for the farmers in each of these locations. To develop something for each bioregion is key. And it's like, that's the tester, put the tester packs out everywhere and just see what phenotypes express themselves with the aim of capturing something through breeding.
Yep.
You know?
And I should add on to that. So folks, you know, a lot of the discussion about IP protection has just been, it's controversial, right? And so I think everybody here knows that we're one of those groups that has pursued IP protection, and we protected our work. And so, you know, now that we've done that, I think it's important everybody understands that the opposite of what some people think is going to happen with our ability to protect that is probably what's going to happen, meaning that we now are offering testing and trialing agreements to our farmers. It's a new thing. Most people aren't doing it, but playing into what Reggie's saying, this is exactly how we learn. And so anybody in our network that's interested in this, we'll offer you a testing and trialing agreement with your purchase and your non-propagation clause, which actually allows you to go ahead and select phenotypes. We can educate you and support you in how to do that and how to hold back the clonal variety from the mother while the mother flowers, or while the plant flowers, excuse me, a mother variety while the plant flowers. And then, you know, help you guys to help us select some beautiful new varieties out of these things, or some phenotypes out of these things. Because what we're seeing in our lines are 35, 36, 37 to 1. You know, we just had our first 40 to 1 out of Hawaii, which I'm really proud to say, that is a 12% and total T compliant yielder. So it's worth us diving into the phenotypes. And so the idea is, look, let's learn together. You show us what you found in your region. We'd like to obviously have that progeny to develop and work with, but the other side of that is, after the TNT agreement, after the testing and trialing agreement, if our farmers have discovered something that's wonderful, our goal is, you know, we have these great farms like Luke here's with Nova Hemp and in Virginia, and Luke Greer, and give him the opportunity to say, look, here's a Nova Hemp painted lady. It's a 38 to 1. It's a 2.5 consistent terpene yielder. And so, you know, obviously it helps everybody's brand is the idea, but the big picture here is to get everybody to sort of accelerate the learning curve. You know, we understand that as much as this has been a wonderful opportunity to profit for everybody by making seed, that we have a really strong responsibility to bring this industry forward. It's been sitting stagnant for 70 or 80 years. The genetics haven't really moved forward on the hemp side. So in order to accelerate that process, and I think most of the people here know it, we're really open to learning. I mean, even at the risk of potentially losing some profitability, ooh, right? We're here to learn and open the door for everybody. Go ahead, Reg, you got anything else?
No, you know, I'm always excited to see more environments that this plant is in. It's always been a study of epigenetics in the cannabis plant for me.
That's it.
So.
That's it. So yeah. So I mean, you're the guru on plant plasticity, man. And you know, the evolutionary plasticity and epigenetic influence the environment has over plants. So you want to touch on that a second? What you've seen, maybe?
Like the predictable influence of the environment, I guess, on the plant expression.
Sure.
And then we already touched on how latitude changes things, how something in California at 40 degrees north could be planted in March and harvested in October, and you bring it to a lower latitude and it's planted in March, harvested in June. And that's like the influence of that. And then like the influence of elevation as well. Like in the islands, it was interesting to see how they performed at sea level and versus 9,000 feet, and how they performed on the leeward side versus the windward side, and all these peculiarities, which really influence genetic selection, right, more than anything.
So are you seeing anything like year to year? Have you seen any adaptation that you can speak to in the plant, like versus the ones on the sea level to 9,000 feet? Or is the next year the one more prone to being ready for 9,000 feet?
No, but it was predictable. It was tough to, like, if the genetic didn't, like, it took an outcross and then selection to move a plant to a certain direction. If it didn't excel at high elevation, it wasn't the same genetics didn't excel the next year, for instance.
Gotcha.
If it wasn't like it would change much within its genetics, but if you outcrossed it to something that did excel, then like a portion of the population would then be able to be chosen because it excelled more in that elevation. So it's tough to nudge something. It's tough for something that within its own narrow bandwidth to then express something different, because it's really expressing the environment and the genetics in that environment without outcrossing if you're keeping it itself. That's why we need to like bring things together in these new environments to discover what works, what shows itself is one thing, but like to really make a cross and then go down the line with the ones that perform differently or more superiorly is more almost an easier path to like finding something that works. So like,
Sure.
like with the Yuma, for instance, it's got really good traits in Hawaii. It actually grows into a 12-foot tall plant. And it was kind of funny because it was actually hot. It was like a 0.7 CBD, but it was a 0.7 THC. It seemed like a 1-to-1 in one of the tests I saw. But it's like how exciting to breed something like that with something that's like below the threshold, but maybe doesn't have that vegetative growth cycle. And that's where R&D doesn't really pay off right away quite often. It's like
Sure.
it's the long play. And so like when you have R&D versus production, it's tough. There's farmers that need to produce something within a predictable range. And then there's those that can devote some space to the R&D and forward looking.
Yeah, well, you bring up a really good point about outcrossing. You know, when we talk about hemp genetics in particular, that's a new iteration of breeding, and the model here is get a mother clone variety that has the expressions that you want, and then reverse that to create a male copy of it, and then that's, you know, in crossing those to create your progeny. And there are some benefits. There's a little less phenotypic variability we see, but you know, when you talk about actually creating a strong plant, a healthy plant, a plant that's vigorous and the plant's going to go forward, you know, this is something that Reggie and I have learned over 20 some odd years of breeding, and why you don't see us inbreed like that. Line breeding or inbreeding like that will bring some negative traits to the surface, but in the long run, it's not a fast way to get to field hardiness or stability. And so again, you talk about Davis genetics for hemp genetics, we carried that knowledge into our CBD 30-to-1 breeding. And although it was a lot harder, folks, for us to find the genetics that check the boxes for you guys, the work was a lot more comprehensive. The end result is, as everybody's now seeing, varieties that do very well in these fringe environments, and honestly stand up to things that if you'd asked me 5 years ago if this plant could stand up to it, I'd have probably told you no. But what we're learning is the plant is a very, very tough plant. So outcrossing is a huge part of that, folks. If you're going to start a breeding program, you know, make sure you're outcrossing any place that you can. You know, it's definitely the way to, like I say, it's the longer way to get there, but it's the way to create the right lines that will have staying power for the future. Okay, well, since we're running over now, I'm going to go ahead. Let's, if John Bays is here, so I'd like to introduce John Bays. John Bays is, John Bays is quite a well-known individual in this space. He's very accomplished. I have known John for about 8 or 9 years now. We came up both in the Oregon medical industry. So you're going to get a little slice outside of hemp, industrial, or cannabinoid. We're going to talk a little bit about our Bhutan Glory project, which is the project that we did for the Dalai Lama's library in New York. It's an altruistic collaboration, and I'm going to let John have the floor if he's ready. Is John here with us, Scott?
I'm here.
Hey, oh, nice background, dude.
Figured this was the best spot, so you don't see my kid playing around doing somersaults in the sprinter here.
Cool. So John is the founder.
He just assured me he wasn't, but
oh, sure he is. Yeah, and Bodhi's an amazing kid, and if he comes in the background, that'll be fine too. So John is the founder of Green Bodhi Genetics. Hey, Bodhi. For those of you that don't know him, and he has just done some amazing work. He's done some wonderful collabs, put out some just absolutely stellar genetics over the last several years. And aside from that, just been a wonderful friend to me, and came in and did this Bhutan Glory collab with us, which created an amazing variety with his selection work, our progeny. And if you want to talk a little bit about that Bhutan Glory, John, I'll give you the floor, and then we can go on from there.
Well, I think really, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and just thank you for the friendship, and thank you for all the knowledge you've dropped on me over the years. And really, it's even just here, I've learned a lot of stuff in this last 40 whatever minutes that, you know, it's kind of over my head. And I'm you know, mainly an intuitional guy, and my main, you know, study is psychology and philosophy. So botany and you know, I studied biology and science in college and all that too, but you know what I mean? Botany wasn't my emphasis, it was geology. So a lot of this I've learned intuitionally just through the process of observation and relating with what I feel is a high level wisdom plant. And as people mentioned earlier, has more niche markets than anything because it has more benefit to humanity and the world than any plant on this globe, from my opinion, from the sources of food, fuel, fiber, medicine. It's pretty much checked every single box if the systems would get in play to access and utilize that potential it's got, which it sounds like is happening. You know, a lot of information on this webinar already is sounding really good and moving in that direction to where we're going to have some real evolution in the utilization of this plant. And that's huge, you know, because in my mind, there's no other thing that brings evolution and revolution to this planet right now and the systems that we have going, you know. So for me, years ago, this was the only move I could make when I decided to not go the direction I wanted to go when I was younger, because, you know, wrong views, whatever. This was really the only move I could make to create an immense amount of benefit, in my opinion, and also be that change that can revive awareness in the human condition in a way that's quite unique. You know, if something's mimicking itself as oxytocin in our endocannabinoid system and fits in the same receptor, that alone says something huge, you know. So if it's the thing that's going to be our gateway to a pure type of happiness on a most innate, simple level, then that's something to be observed. And really, to me, why I am in the field I'm at in, and not in any other niche in this industry, but for the more psychological effects and psychotropic effects it has, to be honest. So that, and in turn, you know, if we're happier, more subdued in our stress hormones and more invigorated in our peace of mind and love reality that our body engages in most in healing, I think that alone is such a huge mechanism for the human condition right now that it's leading up to that. You know, there's a reason all this pilot of hemp and all is happening, and I really feel like it's moving in the direction towards this, you know, toward what the plant has to offer on every level. So that being said, that's why this project was such a big deal and a huge thing for us, because you know, the mentioning the philanthropic collaboration and donating all the proceeds of the Bhutan Glory project to His Holiness the Dalai Lama's Library Museum project in Ithaca, New York, which my teacher, Venerable Tenzin Chosang, he's the president of Namgyal Monastery in North America, which is his only seat. So he basically, they started this monastery years back, but it moved towards being the home and the main seat of this particular practice called Kala Chakra. So it's a very rich and diverse practice, probably the most complex practice in Tibetan Buddhism. Not probably, it is, but so this is the home and the learning center for that particular practice and all other practices His Holiness's monastery, Namgyal Monastery, is holding the unbroken lineage of. So that being said, Venerable Chosang's also, I don't think I mentioned, I'm not sure if I did, he's the chaplain of Cornell University, the Buddhist chaplain there. So we met about a little more than 10 years ago there. So I've been going there every year, 2, 3, sometimes more, sometimes less times a year. And I have a residence there also on His Holiness property. I have a yurt there that I've donated, but in retreat, I stay there. And so we have a really close connection there, and it's a really deep place in my heart there. And His Holiness, I haven't seen anyone that's really changed the world on that level in this time. And so it's such a great honor and blessing to be associated with that monastery and that lineage family, and really offering this is just one thing that I feel we can do, but it's really just close to my heart in that way. The way it started, I did another project with Bodhi seeds, and we raised, I think, around $17,000 for His Holiness Library Museum project. And Jeremy hit me up after seeing that, inspired by that, and said what he wanted to do, and informed me of how much there actually was at stock to offer. And it's just mind-blowing generosity. So really, for us to be a part of it in any way, to just even offer that opportunity to the industry, it's just a huge blessing. And from our perspective, at least, I am a Buddhist, so I have some bias, I guess, towards His Holiness in that way. But even if I wasn't, I would, because before I was a Buddhist, I really had a high reverence and respect for His Holiness and what he was doing for the world and our environment and religious harmony, and the all single one human family and the Tibetan cause. It's just he's doing a lot, and the least we can do is help that way. So it's just a great honor to be able to, and I just very grateful for Jeremy for allowing us to be a part of this project and doing what he's doing with it.
Thank you, John. And I would just cap that by saying that this is what we're about. We're about this paradigm shift in thinking around the way that we're doing business and the way that we're conducting ourselves as a civilization. So not to get too deep, the core of this is obviously food, fuel, fiber, and medicine, but we certainly put this altruistic collaboration together because we firmly believe that a lot of the problems that are happening in this world are, related to our approach towards business and our approach towards money. And so, just to kind of make a statement that, listen, hey, we see that there are things that are more important here in this world to make a change. And I'll just go back to, looking at Bodhi in the background there, that this is really about our kids and our kids' kids. We, at least for me, we see that, we may not be leaving a better place if we don't make some changes here. And we're certainly not leaving a more love-filled place. So, that's a lot of what this is about. And I do want you all to know that you can jump right in and buy these Bhutan Glory seeds. 100% of the proceeds, not 100% of the profit, 100% of the proceeds go straight to the monastery through John. And it's John who's given us that opportunity to experience this. So yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted out of you. That's absolutely perfect. I'm sure everybody out there is loving the fact that they tuned into this today. And, I'd like to kind of cap that off by talking a little bit about the future of what we're looking to do. So yes, I said to Ben, and thank you, Pat, for busting it all out and telling the world that we're coming out with this new grain production. But the other side of this is that, through the history of working with this plant as medicine, John and I have helped countless people with oil and medicine. And one of the things that we've come to understand is that it's these type 2 plants, these plants that are 1-to-1s, 2-to-1s, 10-to-1s, and 20-1 CBD to THC ratio that have the highest efficacy as medicine. So separating from the industrial side, the next collaborations that John and I are leaning into are the type 2 collaborations. And so I'm really excited that probably over the next 18 months, he and I plan to release a handful of type 2s. He's got some incredible progeny to work with. Obviously, we have some incredible progeny to work with, a lot of good energy in that progeny. But yeah, if you want to talk for a second, maybe on some of what you've seen with type 2 plants, if you don't mind, John.
Yeah, so for me personally, now, especially with the hemp industry in full force and how it's happening, and what's happened in the past, you know, because at first we were thinking it's all THC, then it went to this shift, oh, CBD, but you know, what we've seen has the most efficacy is honestly high amounts of THC with lower amounts of CBD. Well, that's more in the cancer reality. If you're going at autism, epilepsy, these kind of things, it's higher CBD, extremely low THC, but the THC is still in there. So from behavioral, emotional disorders to pathogenic and cancer realities, these it depends, you know, and there is a lot of studies out now because there's been a lot of studies done on cancer. There's been a lot of studies done on Alzheimer's. There's been a lot of studies done on autism, on epilepsy. So we're quite familiar now, but still, to me, what I've found is that when there is that entourage and the harmony of all the cannabinoids together, meaning as complex multitude of cannabinoids is, I mean, right now I'm sure we can't see what's there because, you know, years ago, they used to think when I was bringing them herb, when Steep Hill Lab was just, you know, in its beginnings, I found out there's a lab kept testing cannabis. So I reached out to Addison, we communicated and basically found, sorry about that. They were testing the Hazy Kush and they were confused because it was having a high amount of CBN they're finding.
You muted, John. I think you muted on accident.
Okay, sorry about that.
Perfect, no problem.
You know, so and now what we're finding, it was THCV, and so it had a similar spike. So that I'm sure there's a lot of standardization, a lot of standards that maybe even aren't even perceived at this point that offer loads of medicinal value, you know, that we're not seeing what combinations of terpenes and flavonoids when they're combined with cannabinoids, what that combination is, you know, meaning everything once it compiles on itself and there's in harmony, there's an entourage in that maximizes the potential of the plant, you know. So for us seeing that, obviously through our THC focus, it was very clear, especially when we started adding minor amounts of CBD or switching the levels. So the medicinal value, as with everything, I think it depends on the body of the person, what their connection with the plant is physiologically to where that will work with their body and their own endocannabinoid system, their own physiology in a way, just like people that eat meat or eat veg or eat fit or eat vegan, you know, if they know what's best for their body and they're doing that, their body's going to be the most optimum. And for sure, it's like that with our medicines and with our, especially plant medicines. You know, you look at China and, you know, in, I don't know what year, but 500 years ago or so, they have the Chinese herbal pharmacopoeia that has this plant in it, and it had over 100 medicinal uses back then, you know, not to mention all its fiber grain realities. So that they were utilizing back then too, you know, and there was quite an industry of that in China throughout the years and all over Asia. I mean, they're even pointing now that some of the first signs of the cannabis hemp plant are from the Tibetan plateau. So and predates what we were thinking even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So there's a lot of information coming out also with this entourage harmony that these plants offer us. So I think putting it up through the test from people that are experienced on all levels of this plant, that's really what it's going to take. You know, because we're learning a lot from all the grain, high level ag production, and for sure they're learning a lot from us on what this plant means, you know, to humanity and to the esoteric benefit that it has that we can all pinpoint one way or another, but to prove it and to start bringing that to the table is going to be huge for the industry and for, you know, humanity, in my opinion.
No question about it. No question about it, man, for sure. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We recognized a long time ago that these are the high efficacy plants. And so I just want everybody to know, just as we're leaning into grain, I'm working with my good friend John here to make sure that when federal legalization happens, that we are ready with some high efficacy type 2 plants that can kick the crap out of people's seizure disorders and autism, and of course looking at the cancer, all these things that we've been seeing. I mean, I wish I could share with you, 50 stories in just a breath of the things that we've seen with this plant from the medicinal side. But thank you, John, for coming. I'm super proud to be working with you on this. The Bhutan, by the way, folks, is still available. And as you would expect, when your heart comes, into something and your intention is there, the result of this plant is incredible. Like what we see out of Bhutan Glory are the first hemp genetics that carry burnt tire rubber, which is not attractive to a lot of people, I know, but these are the flavors that are the OG Kush flavors, if you will, that these lineages that so many people in the THC side are looking for. And so as the boutique craft market starts to come online and people are wanting these unique terpene expressions, for us to have a 30-to-1 hemp variety that is palatable like that is pretty special. So I'm just very proud to have been a part of that Bhutan Glory, very proud to be a part of an altruistic collab like that. And hopefully we're setting the tone for people that we have to create a paradigm shift in thinking around the way that we do business, or we just don't make it very long. It just feels like to me. So that being said, I guess what I'll do is go ahead and bring back out Ben. If Ben's still sitting with us, bring Reggie, and we'll give everybody an opportunity to ask us all a couple of questions. I know we're running over time and everybody probably has chores and things they need to get to. So I know you've got some skiing at squad to do, or some boarding at squad to do.
It's softening up, man. We're waiting for it to slush out. Kid's not even ready. We're just going to be like hitting the park jumps all day. So whatever.
Nice.
My knees can take a little more time, to like this 46-year-old hitting jumps is like it's fun, but man, the body's changed.
Hey man, cannabinoids are a big part of it though.
Yeah.
Come on, I'm 50, approaching 50 here, so we're doing okay. We're still snowboarding and skiing, everybody. But yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to the floor if there are any other questions, and if not, we'll go ahead and part ways. But yeah, absolutely, yeah, slather the knees with CBD salve, Pat Jack says.
I'll just take bong hits all day.
Okay, so anybody have any questions for us? I see 2 in the Q&A, it looks like. Scott, where are we at?
Yeah, we've got two.
Thank you, Rachel.
We've got 2 in the yeah, we got questions coming in now. So first one's from Greg. He wants to know the difference between testing the COAs for harvest and 30-day pre-harvest for compliance.
Okay, well, that's a good one. And I mean, I'm just going to lean right into that from the direction that I always kind of approach it. And that's, we're in a time when granted, the departments of ag have given us this window because of the way the genetics are. There's a little bit of variability and lack of consistency in the genetics. So the departments of ag have given us this window, full well knowing that a 30-day pre-harvest is going to pull our cannabinoid contents down. So we shouldn't have any problem passing those tests and having a compliant crop to push to market. The other side of that, folks, is that we are completely avoiding consumer responsibility by doing that. Because when we have a 30-day pre-harvest, that's not representative of the product that we're now supplying to the marketplace. And what I see is a lot of people using that pre-harvest test report to push product into the marketplace. So when you look at our COAs, the COAs that you're looking at are representative of a mature plant at harvest, not representative of pre-harvest test report. So be aware of that, because there are a lot, as these compliance requirements change. We're in a time where there's a sort of a little bit of questionable approach as to how we market genetics. And so we hear a lot of test often, test early, be prepared to harvest early, all of these type of things to get to be in compliance. And I just want everybody to know that at some point here, guys, and then probably by the end of this year, we're going to have a situation where even if you pass the pre-harvest test report, you're going to have to do a post-harvest test on your product. So that being said, this is why Davis Farms has developed a program of pushing our COAs out at full maturity so that we're not fooling the consumer. Hope that answered that.
Yes, that sounded nice. Next one is from Some Punk. In the future, will we see more full spectrum of cannabinol in flower?
Oh, so you mean CBN, cannabinol? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I believe that's what he's referring to.
Okay, so I just would say, generally speaking, we're going to see a lot more cannabinoids pop up. For one, they're there, we're not looking at them. And I think going back to what John said, and you can certainly speak to that, John, that once we start adding all of these in and going back to the full complex of what the plant offered naturally, we gain more, benefit from it. I would say that one of the things that we've had the benefit of is we've been able to send 4 of our varieties to Israel for study, and we've been able to look at 155 compounds. And I was quite shocked when on that 155 compounds, there were 74 cannabinoids. So I haven't looked at 74 cannabinoids historically in my life before that, but it shows me that we're just scratching the surface on what we're looking at. So I certainly think as the market evolves and wakes up and we start looking at analytics like that, that broad spectrum and full spectrum is going to become the future, and isolates and lower compound derivatives are going to sort of fall by the wayside.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that too, man, because like what's happening now with science, what's happening now with technology, what's happening now with our understanding of standardizations and all this kind of thing. Once the nutraceutical department comes in or industry comes in hard, it's going to be diversified in such a degree because we're going to actually be able to see what we have. And we're going to be able to see that if there's 70 visible now, well, there's probably like 2, 3, 5, 10 times that. Like actually,
probably, yeah.
Get into true, perspective. So it's just beginning now, and just like any industry and anything that we're just getting the first few snapshots on. I mean, I remember how it was when it was just Steep Hill Lab and SC Labs, and when they were standardizing everything and how it was happening, because I was friends with both the owners. So it's like I'm hearing all this stuff and working with Oregon legislation and how it was going. It's like everyone, it was so new, and our snapshot was tiny, we couldn't even see anything. And then the lack of science involved, the lack of professionality involved, and the undergroundness of it all, there was only a few of us that were coming up and being outspoken about it and really getting out in there. So once this goes full mainstream and full force with all sciences involved, who knows what we're looking at really, because
big change,
especially
give
if you
me
look at
goosebumps.
it on a simple level. This plant has the entire globe hypnotized right now and has the focus of all humanity, over everything that we've went through this last couple of years. That's the thing on top still. So that's, something to think about on a more, philosophic and esoteric level, I guess.
Absolutely. This plant has certainly evolved with us. And I often question who's running the show here.
Doesn't seem like we are, man, because I don't know. My life revolves around supporting and bringing the best potential of this plant to the community. So sounds like more I'm like a bee, or like a like something that's more working for it versus it working for me. So
I think so. No question about it. We all recognize that if we've been working for the plant for a little while. I think, we can beat around the bush and kind of laugh about it. But truthfully, I'm absolutely humbled by this plant, and I'm really proud to be in servitude to it. And just, it's been an honor to work with this plant for so long. And another thing I really want everybody here to understand is that, once I hit maybe 100 cycles of working with the plant, another level of humility hit me, right? Rather than saying, oh, I've got this all figured out. Like once we really got there and I could grow the plant proficiently, you know, I think another moment of humility just hit me. I was so humbled by the fact that this plant is such a high being and she's always going to continue to teach me, always. So definitely real there. Any other questions for, oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I said, you can even tell that by the multitude of effects it has on people, that people like us will really engage and want that introspective analysis and critical, you know, self perspective this plant offers, versus some people are like, you know, that's like kryptonite to them. You know what I mean? They, oh, I had this, you know, we all get it. So for it to engage our mind in that level of way in combination with its medicinal aspect, it's like starts to get quite deep, you know.
It does. No question about it. It does. So what's up next? Who's got a question? Anybody?
Yeah, Gail and Clarence out in Hawaii, they're asking, what about a cross between Yuma and cherry wine, starting at sea level and finishing at 7,000 feet, old school Hawaii?
Reggie.
What about it? Yeah, time to start making these really opposite crosses. Try to, and then who has the space for the R&D on this? Like, it would be great to work in Hawaii again and work towards genetic approval and stabilization of traits. Really.
And Gail, just so I don't know if you know Gail and Clarence, Reggie, but Gail and Clarence are the first licensees, the first hemp licensees in Hawaii.
Cool.
Yeah.
On Kauai.
Yeah, good people. They're not on Kauai, no.
Oh, Big Island.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay. Zach is wanting to know, is there any up-to-date reference that you recommend for medical, psychological uses in regard to the specific cannabinoids?
Yeah, I would say that probably the one place that I would look is who I just referenced, and that's who we're working with in Israel, and it's Dr. Dedi Meiri, and under the Technion Institute's Research Center for Cannabinoid and Cancer. And although it's just cancer, they say cancer, they don't just do cancer, they do a lot of other indications. Look for any white papers from those guys. If you want to circle out to me after this, I'm more than happy to share with you the analytics that we have from our 4 varieties that we sent over there, just to kind of give you an idea of what they're looking at. And then I'd even be happy to schedule a call with you to talk for a few minutes about you know, what we're learning from them about what some of those things are doing on the indications. And I'm telling you, we're right at the front end of this. So I don't have a ton to share with you because it's really cutting edge, but I can certainly give you those analytics that have those comprehensive compounds on them.
Very nice, very nice. I don't see any more questions in the queue.
Okay. No questions for Ben? No questions about industrial applications. I have questions for Ben. Man, I'm going to get off here and call Ben.
They
for real.
those in there.
Well, I'm pretty excited about your news on the what is it, 90%, you know, the feminized grain, you know, variety. That's a pretty big deal. I have every farmer, even, you know, wheat farmer, asking, can I get rid of these males? Or, you know, 90% of them, they're pointless. They're just using up space.
That's right.
So I guess I know you might not be able to go into the detail per se on the breeding background on it, how you got there, but how do you see, is the seed production on that variety different than, say, a monoecious or any other dioecious variety, or how does?
Well, the obvious thing, and going back to what Pat just said right there, he's right. It's 92% is what we're looking at, 92 to 8. And you know, what we're doing there is we're actually creating feminized seed. Okay. And then we're introducing a population of regular seed into the feminized seed so that we can gain the amount of males that we need. But yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it more. And there's nothing that I'm holding close to the chest on it. It's just, it came out, and I think it's a really important conversation to have because we've been holding on to it as process. And I think it's something that is just a piece of low-hanging fruit that needs to be acknowledged. Here's Pat addressing it. Here's you saying we've got all these farmers talking about it. It's just a simple piece of low-hanging fruit, and it just needed some people with a little bit of seed technology to come in and do that. So essentially, we've bred the line off of our American Feral lineage. So the variety that we have for grain production is a 50% American Feral that checks the boxes while still being THC compliant. And guys, it'll be great once we can eliminate that, and I can just start breeding for grain specifically, and I don't have to worry if something's a 0.4 or 0.5, because we have found grain producing varieties that actually do produce more than this variety if we can eliminate that THC threshold. Not that we need to go to 2%, but so it's a 50-50 American Feral that we bred, massive grain producer, and then we've just thrown in and bred 8% of that, or 16% of that regular, with an anticipated 50-50 split between male female. Even though we know the ratios tends to be 60-40, it should give us about 2% more male or more pollen production than we need in the field to get a full seed rate. That's really the question, Ben, is how far can we limit back the pollen and still get a full seed rate? I would also say that another thing that we're looking at from our side is appropriate rates of maturity between male and female, because there's a moment when the female is receptive, and we need to make sure that when she's primarily receptive and has the most stigma, that's the moment that our pollen is ready to be released and cast. So we're looking into all of that. I'm a nerd about this stuff, and I just can't stay in the cannabinoid realm. It's not possible.
Well, that's exciting. We need your insight in the grain side, because we come from a different perspective sometimes, but you've got the history on intimate knowledge of cannabis and its behavior. So that's perfect.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about even deploying some this year if you want to run some trial acres, because we're doing trial acres in North Dakota. We're doing trial acres in Northeastern Oregon. And I would love to talk to you about some trial acres up there, with the byproduct being creating some good foundation seed for the following season. Perfect.
Yeah. And we'd be happy to run it through our cold press system and see how it processes, our ultimately the consumer and buyers need to be happy with the quality of the product, but I'm sure it's going to be a phenomenal variety.
Well, and it's probably not going to be perfect right out of the gate, but that's the beauty of it. We're all here to learn. And again, going back to our bit earlier in the call, the testing and trialing agreements, the IP protection, the open webinars, the education, it's all to shorten the learning curve, folks, because if we can shorten the learning curve and create a sustainable industry, it's better for everybody. It's better for the people that are participating in the industry, and it's certainly better for the planet and the people on the planet. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know if there's anything else. I'm sure everybody's ready to get to their Saturday. I'm so grateful to everybody for coming in. And I guess the last thing I'd say, just so everybody has it, is, Ben, can you please tell everybody where they can contact you, how they can find you, give them a little bit of information there?
Sure. Well, meet me in Montana. Come on up to the middle of nowhere, Golden Triangle, and we'll go look at some hemp. Of course, there's nothing to see right now, but I mean, shoot, we're not even out of winter yet. But yeah, my emails. Yeah, if you're interested in raising grain hemp, or growing for grain or fiber, we're going to be buying and processing grain. So as well as fiber. So yeah, my email is ben@INDHemp.com. I can probably write it here in the chat box here. If you want to reach out and learn more about industrial hemp on the grain fiber. Yeah.
And he's a leader in this space, guys. I'm telling you, in the States, he's leading it. And I'm personally, I want to give a strong push to the Canadian producers. They've been doing a lot of production up there, and I think it's our opportunity to bring some of this to the farmers down south. So Ben's your guy. If you guys are looking, or farmers that are interested in grain or fiber, please don't hesitate to reach out to him. Now I'll do the same for John. John, if you can please tell people how they might be able to reach you, with anything you want to say in closing.
Yeah, I guess the easiest ways to probably reach me is on Instagram at Green Bodhi, or through my website, greenbodhi.org. So also, I just want to give a little plug. we're doing a lot of really cool things. There's this well project we're doing where we're offering hand pump wells to villages around the city of Bodhi in India. It's near Gaya and Bihar region of India. It's one of the poorest regions of India. So cool little project. If people are interested, come take a look. There's a lot of information on Instagram and all that stuff. But yeah, other than that,
it's a big deal. It's a big
simple.
deal what you're doing. I want to say that too, that, you know, I've been watching them put in a lot of these hand pump wells for these communities around here. It's important that we recognize that, you know, clean water, we take it for granted a lot of times, but a lot of these people just don't have access to clean, healthy water. So what they're doing, I mean, what if you put in, I don't know, I've probably watched you put in a dozen wells over the last month
that's
or
a good
two.
thing. I think it's been 12. They're on the 13th
Yeah,
now. Maybe
yeah.
we've already got funding for about 15, 18 more in line. So our goal was 34 because that's how many Kala Chakra initiations His Holiness has given. And the last one was in Bodh Gaya that Bodhi and I were both attendees at also. And then also the one previous there in 2012, we were there. I was there. Bodhi wasn't alive yet, but anyhow, so, you know, just try to make this whole thing be recognized as one human family, like it is, you know, because we're all breathing the same air and we're all drinking the same water, but some people just don't have water. So, you know,
it's true. And the Bhutan Glory, I'd say, you know, also going back to that project, it's a really important thing. If you guys want to get involved in it, you can purchase seed from us that goes directly to the library, or you can make a contribution if you want on our website. We accept contributions. So be more than happy to take that from you and pass it on to His Holiness. Is what's happening up there is they're building that library as a repository of all of the lifetime's work of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it's an incredible thing that they're doing, and it's a really important piece of history, I think, for all of us to be a part of, and get behind and support.
And that's where they're going to also hold all His relics, not all, but a big chunk, because, you know, it's safe in the U.S. and it's stable, and so they're holding all His teachings, you know, it's going to be a huge brain and learning center, because one thing that he teaches more than any religious leader is a non-sectarianism, where all religions, all humanity more so, has these common base values of love, compassion, equanimity, helping others. You know, these things are something that are natural to us, and the things that are going to make us survive. And it's not a religious thing, it's a human thing, and no other religious leaders stated that, you know, so, and really held that strong. And so I think it's something really special for humanity right now to show religious freedom and religious harmony, and that all the religions, and even no religion, has that core value of love and of equanimity and of togetherness that's really going to get us to survive, you know, because it's not going to get pretty these next 100 years. It's no matter what anyone thinks. So if we all come together and really unite, which this plant is doing, you know,
good thing to
so
unite around. Yep.
You know, so here we are. So anyway, sorry to get all weirdo rant, but
no, there's nothing weirdo about that, brother. I'm honored to have you as a friend. That's all very true and very real, man. And this plant has called us together to do that in a big way. So it's neat. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, guys.
Reggie, oh, of course, man. It's an honor having you, man. Absolute honor having you here. Yeah. So Reggie, I'm saying, you want to get a little piece to close with?
You know, it's that it's just reiterating what we're all saying, that many facets at how this plant touches humanity, and the springboard of its introduction back into the field, back into like common day use, and like all of the things that it's going to spawn, all the like changing technology, and be able to like produce things that are like right under so much more acres, you know, right where we're all at, is pretty cool. And let's engage in the plastic nature of this plant everywhere and do it right. Like there's a difference between degrading farming and regenerative farming, and it's time to use this plant to heal farmland and heal people and create wellness for us all to thrive.
Well, guys, I'm really proud to call you all friends. I'm really proud to have you here, but I'm also really proud to call you all friends and be able to give us this platform to come out and speak a little bit. I do want everybody to know this is going to be up on YouTube. You won't be able to comment like Pat is being so great at doing. And thank you, Pat. Pat just said great webinar, Pat Jack. But you'll be able to view this over and over again. We wanted to create an archive here for people to sort of see what our thinking is today, and maybe look back on it and see what we've done in the next 12 months. But I'm just really honored to have you guys as my friends and to have you offer your time today. And for all the attendees, just thank you so much. I know this is a Saturday and it means a lot to me that you came here today, and I really hope that everyone came away with at least one good gem. And yeah, and Zach's inspired. We're inspired too, Zach. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is a really big moment in history. It's been a dark year. 2020 was a dark 12 months for a lot of people. I think there was a lot of awakening and a lot of realization that happened. And ideally, it's just one more catalyst to drive us a little bit closer together and to understand, that we need to make some real changes right now. And the beautiful thing is so many of them can be made with this plant as the core focus. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. And I guess we'll part ways, and much love to everybody. Again, thank you. See you all.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. All right. Everybody have a great day.
Ciao.
Yeah.